Well, good morning. Another Wednesday means that it's time for another week of finance. Last week we talked about budgeting. So, this is a very common topic, in your personal life and in your career. And we looked at a few broader, big picture aspects of it, such as some of the different budget types that you might see in various organizations out there, and some best practices in budgeting. And I had mentioned during last week's content that those ideas mentioned in best practices are some just very broad concepts that would make a great comp question. So, save your notes from that week and revisit some of those concepts before comps, and there might be a little less stress there. And then you had a reaction assignment related to budgeting that you did in Microsoft Excel. So that's a tool that a lot of places use for budgeting. So you got a little bit of practice working in Excel. If you didn't have it already, that you may be very familiar with that. So this week, we're going to be looking at a couple different kinds of financing. One is debt financing and another is equity financing. So both are used when companies or franchisers or whatever do some major projects where they require some borrowing. So financing for bigger projects like stadiums and fields requires teams and companies to go into debt. And that's fine. There's nothing wrong with debt. Debt isn't a bad thing. Most of us do it. I have a mortgage on a house. I have student loans for my school, and those we consider those things to be positive debts, as long as they're not overwhelming us. So it's how we pay for big projects that we can't afford all at once. So financing is how teams pay for stadiums, in the millions and billions of dollars. Nobody has that much money up front. We have to finance it. So debt is when we borrow money with interest to get the project done. So that's debt financing, borrowing money with interest. Same as a car loan or a mortgage or your school loans, if you have any. That's the same thing. So the other type of financing that we're looking at is equity financing. And that's a little bit different. Equity is when we borrow money in exchange for ownership shares. So instead of borrowing money with interest, a team borrows money in exchange for ownership shares. So whoever they borrowed the money from gets ownership shares instead of interest. So at the end of this week, you have financial exercise number 2 due, and it leans heavily on budgeting, and it's asking you to, if you've probably looked at it already, and that's great. And so financial exercise 2 is asking you to make some program decisions kind of on a micro level. So it's asking you to pretend that you're a program director for some paddleboard lessons in the local swimming pool, or here on campus at the pool. Maybe the campus rec program is doing paddleboard. And so it's asking you to make some decisions kind of at the micro level. And what I mean is you're going to have to think about and consider the small details of the program first, like how many participants do you feel like dealing with? Do you want to go for the max number of participants? Maybe you'll get more revenue, but do you have the pool space and the time and the energy to deal with that? You've got to find an instructor for all of those times, and those are some challenges. Or maybe you go for the minimum number of classes, but in that case, you might not make as much revenue. So, you've got to make some decisions based on what you feel like dealing with in your philosophy, and then what you're going to charge for that program. So maybe your philosophy is to make that program available to as many people as possible. So you want to make it as affordable as possible. And so maybe that's your answer with how much you're going to charge. On the other hand, maybe you want to keep your program smaller, and so you're going to charge a little bit more so that only people who really want to do it can come. So you just have some different philosophies based on, or some different decisions to make kind of based on your philosophy. And there's no wrong answer, just some decisions that you're going to have to make on that micro level. And this is a realistic decision or assignment and decisions that you're going to have to make if you were in, say, sales or programming that requires registration. If you're doing a sports camp or something like that, you're going to have to make decisions like this, such as how many spots do we have available to open up for registration? What is our registration cost? Are we going to run a program that lasts 2 months or 2 weeks? And what are the costs associated with that, and what's the profit associated with some of those different scenarios? So this assignment just asks you to break down some of those different scenarios in a template that I've provided for you. So it's just some estimation based on logic types of situations that you use to predict your sales or registration. And that kind of becomes the cornerstone for the rest of your budget. You're going to take what you estimated and then plug it in to the bigger picture budget items. And then this assignment also looks at some of the differences between variable costs, which is what you're getting asked to calculate with your registration predictions, and fixed costs. So you're having to balance those two in your budget. So if you have any questions along the way, let me know. Like I said, this is a pretty realistic assignment if you're ever going to deal with sales or program registration. So I'm just asking you to predict a few different sales scenarios. So as you work on that, feel free to ask me questions. If you get stuck, just holler at me. And that being said, have a great week closing out the month of September. So I can't believe it's flying by already. So have a good week. I'll talk to you soon.